Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to have a discussion that is honestly so interesting and unique to me. I might not be able to do this entire video in one take. I usually do everything in one take because I kind of know exactly all the points I want to hit on when I'm talking about something, but this has so many aspects to it, I actually might have to do this in multiple takes. But it's the whole conversation that has been coming up recently of, well, if we have disconnect bots, bots that replace disconnected players, do we still need to have a disconnect penalty? And of course, like you would initially think, well, yeah, we still want a disconnect penalty because you don't want people just DCing every game. It's not good. But it kind of goes deeper than that because the game it's kind of not consistent with itself anymore. Because we finally now actually have a system when the Nick Cage patch comes. I still can't believe I'm saying that phrase. When that actually happens, we're going to have a system where disconnected players are replaced by bots that are like genuinely probably more useful than your actual solo queue teammates. I'm not making that a joke. I'm not being silly. I actually think bots on average will be more useful than a solo queue teammate. So we have this wonderful system here that's going to no longer put you in a 3v1 when someone decides to stop playing the game, and that's great. But the problem is this wonderful system is easily circumvented by just killing yourself on the hook. And people that are not interested in playing this match, make no mistake, they're playing and behaving in a very selfish way, which means they're only going to care about themselves, which means they're not going to eat the DC penalty. They're just going to kill themselves on hook. That way, their team doesn't get a bot. They don't get punished. They're happy, but their team is now in the exact same scenario that we're currently in, that we've been trying to fix for 7 years now. The whole issue of being 3v1s that are basically unwinnable. So, like I'm saying, the game is at odds with itself. We have this new great system, but the game de-incentivizes you from using the system, and it encourages you to behave selfishly and just kill yourself on the hook. So the way I see it is we only have two options. A, we remove the disconnect penalty, or B, you make it so you can't kill yourself on the hook anymore. Those are the only two options that make sense because right now, what is the point of this system when you're de-incentivized to use the system? It doesn't make any sense. So that is where the whole discussion is taking place, and that is what I honestly find so interesting because both sides have their merits, and I do think it leans a bit more towards one side, but I'm going to try to keep this as neutral as possible and really make this be a discussion in the community because this is one of the most divided things I have ever seen, and it's not even like, it's a very even divide from what I've seen. Now, it's mostly killers that are in favor of not letting people kill themselves on hook, and it's mostly survivors that are in favor of not removing the DC penalty. In fact, it's almost solely that, so it really is a killers or survivor thing. But there are a lot of interesting things on both sides. So first, let's go over if there were no disconnect penalties. I think this would be the slightly better option. Here, I'm going to go off my own opinion here. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. Real quick, my own opinion. I think they should keep disconnect penalties, but make them more lenient. Make it so the first 3 a day or something like that don't have penalties. And then your fourth one, it doesn't go 1-5. Like you start at 15 minutes or something higher. So you're basically allowed 3 matches a day where you decide this is miserable. I hate this, whatever. And that way you can't just chronically disconnect every game, but at least you'll be able to do something and it'll encourage the game to actually give your teammates who you are essentially ruining the game for, at least something else to help them out. So that's my opinion. You should have disconnect penalties, but they should be a bit more lenient now. That's my whole opinion. But let's go over the benefits and, the cons of both. So first, if there was no DC penalty, what would happen? Obviously, people would disconnect more. This is the first counter argument people make for this. They would say, well, people are just going to start disconnecting a lot more. And that's true. People will start disconnecting more. Now, the way I look at it, that is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, that would be kind of the point. You would want players that have no interest in playing the game to disconnect, because then they would be replaced by a bot that does have an interest in doing the objective. They do have an interest in actually playing the game because they're coded to do so. So people always try to use that as a gotcha moment, like, oh, well, people are going to start DCing. It's going to be terrible. But I think that's good. People that have no interest in playing the match for whatever reason are encouraged to DC. That way, you'll get a teammate that is going to actually play the match. Otherwise, they're just going to kill themselves on hook, or they're just going to AFK, run into the killer. How many times have you seen that? That's what I see now. I will say at least 5 times a stream, I will start the match off, not even with an offensive killer, Wraith without sloppy butcher, no slowdowns, just basic nothing Wraith. I'll hit the first guy, and they'll just point at me and then point at the hook. And then I'm like, okay, well, I guess this game's over. And I would prefer if that guy could disconnect. That way, the other 3 teammates that have not shown a disinterest in playing the match can still have a relatively normal match, and they're not instantly doomed. Now, this would make it so killers would go against bots more, which, yeah, that is boring as well. But in my opinion, going against a 3v1 from the start of the match is equally as boring as a pure bot match. Because in both scenarios, you're basically predetermined to win. It's just not very exciting. 3v1s are essentially a guaranteed win for the killer as long as it happens early enough into the match. And going against, 3 or 4 bots, it's probably going to be a win for the killer as well. I'm not saying all the time, but probably. So I find those two situations equally boring. However, in the scenario where everyone has bots, at the very least, the match can just end. Because if there was all bots, obviously the killer would be able to just leave as well if that system was implemented. And so you would just be able to go on to another match. So I think that would be overall a bit more beneficial. But the thing is, you need to look at why people disconnect to begin with. There are a lot of legitimately good reasons to disconnect in this game. And there's a lot of really stupid reasons to disconnect, and I've seen all of them. Like I said, sometimes I'll be playing literally like a hillbilly with no add-ons and like the most basic build ever, and people will DC on first chain. So I'm like, what? A hillbilly? Really? He's like the most fun killer in the game, and you're DCing against him? Who do you want to play with? There's no one more fun than this. This is the maximum amount of fun. What the fuck are you even playing the game for if you're going to DC on a hillbilly? Like, what the hell, man? So there are people like that. Trust me. I'm not going to pretend they don't exist. There's too many of them, really. But then there's also people that DC for fairly legitimate reasons. The killer's intentionally slugging everyone to death. You're going against a condemned Sadako. It's a 40-minute skull merchant game. Night in general. There are reasons that are fairly legitimate, at least in my opinion, where I'm like, okay, I understand why these people are DCing. This thing is miserable. I get it. No one should be doing this to begin with. And there's the whole problem of, well, people that, main Skull Merchant or Knight, they're basically going to be playing against only bots. And this may be a based or Giga Chad or a completely shit take for me, but in my opinion, good. I think those killers do more harm to the community overall than people disconnecting from matches. Because they are the epitome of everything that survivors hate about the game. They are extremely miserable, long, drawn out, zero chase, just nothing fun is happening with killers like that. That's why I don't actually care if people disconnect from killers like that. I frankly think they don't deserve to even have people to play against because it's actually that miserable. And yes, there are times when someone's playing Skull Merchant and they're not doing a 40-minute 3J game. They're just trying to chase and stuff like that. And sometimes people will disconnect early against them before they have a chance to even see that they're going to be doing that. And I think that's unfair, for example. I think there are legitimate reasons to DC, but then people also abuse it and DC way too much when there's the slightest inkling of discomfort or something that's boring or whatever. So it's complicated. There are legit reasons to DC, but people will also abuse the hell out of it. So that is a definite con to not having DC penalties. But the pro is if you allow the DCs, then the remaining players are no longer punished in the match. And then they'll be able to actually play with a bot that does want to play the game. Now, there is the other side where you would have to remove the ability to kill yourself on hook because that's the only other logical option, right? Either you double down in not letting people not play the game, or you just remove the DC penalties. I don't see a way where this can work with one or the other. So the other option is removing the ability to kill yourself on hook, which is a very, very controversial take. It's mostly suggested by people that play exclusively killer, is what I've noticed. And if that's the case, I can understand why. Because, of course, if someone kills himself on the hook, killers don't want necessarily a free stomp. I know a lot of survivors think that the killers just want to go with a big free stomp and they want to get 4K at 5 gens, oh boy. No, killers do want to exert their skill on the match. They do want to have a bit of a challenge. Now, obviously, they want to win, but they do want to have a bit of a challenge. If the game is a 3v1 at 5 gens, there's no challenge anymore. The killer just wins. So in that scenario, it's actually really boring, and it's just as boring as going against bots. So that is why killers are usually having the opinion that they don't want people to be able to kill themselves on hook because they're just basically robbed of a match. There's just no chance of winning anymore. There's no drama. It's not even exciting. So that's why killers would not allow you to want that. But if you've ever played a solo queue match, sometimes you understand that sometimes you need to get out of the match that you're playing. It's not super common. For me, it's maybe 1 out of every 15, 20 games I get like a condemned Sadako or something that's just so miserable that they don't deserve to have human opponents. Like that kind of miserable. Again, it's not super common. Just because someone tunnels you or something like that, that's not talking about that. I'm talking about the real scum shit. And in those matches, if you were not able to leave the game and you were forced to wait the entire time, the killer slugs you or bleeds you out, but then picks you up and then hooks you. I have had a scenario recently, it was only a few days ago, where one of my teammates DC'd at 5 gens. The killer hit them, they just immediately DC'd. And I was like, all right, this is dumb, whatever. I'm not going to do a 3v1 at 5 gens. It's pointless, so I just ran into the killer. And I was like, okay, obviously this game's over. I pointed at a hook. And I was like, can you just end it? He downed me, and he slugged me for 3 minutes and 59 seconds, then picked me up and hooked me for 1 minute, and then 1 minute and 50 seconds, I was finally able to kill myself on hook. The killer was so spiteful to me, even though I didn't ruin the match. I was not the person that DC'd. The game was over at that point. I'm not playing a 3v1. It's pointless. So I was like, can you just, let it go? But then he, out of spite, put me on the ground for the maximum time and just picked me up to waste even more of my time. And look, some people deserve that sometimes, but I feel like in that scenario, I don't deserve that. I didn't end the match. It's the guy that DC'd at the start that ended the match. And scenarios like that is what I'm saying. The fact that I have to be subjected to the killer being a piece of shit for that long of a period, that is a miserable feeling, especially when you're playing solo queue. That's the kind of stuff that makes people just stop playing the game entirely. If you're having kind of a couple of these matches that are not even back-to-back, but too frequently for it to be safe, that's the kind of shit that it's not people just get bored, they just stop playing Dead by Daylight. And that, I think, is a very frightening side effect of removing the ability to kill yourself on hook. Sometimes there are matches you just need to leave. I don't know. If you played solo queue long enough, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't play solo queue enough, then play solo queue enough, and you'll start to see what I'm talking about. There are some scenarios where it's totally justified to kill yourself on hook. And if you couldn't do that and you were forced to stay with whatever sadistic shit the killer is trying to put you through, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that makes people stop playing Dead by Daylight. And that's what I would worry about from that side. So that is the scariest part of not being able to remove yourself from the match eventually at certain points. And those are like the two main sides to the whole argument. Now, there are still so many little counter arguments to either side. I just wanted to bring both sides to light and let you guys discuss what you think the correct solution would be. Maybe the correct solution is doing absolutely nothing, at which point you'd have to ask, well, why'd you even add the bots then? People are just going to kill themselves on hook as they currently are. And the main central argument of people that are advocating for removing the DC penalty are you cannot stop someone from not wanting to play a game. You can't force people to play video games no matter what you do. If they can't DC, they'll kill themselves on hook. If they can't kill themselves on hook, they'll AFK in a corner. If you, can't AFK in a corner, I don't know. People will always find a way to not play the game. And disconnecting and adding a bot will make the thing hopefully play the game. And here is a crackpot theory I have. I can't believe I'm actually trying to do all this in one take. I have a crackpot theory. For example, there are scenarios where people will disconnect against like a Wesker, which I never understand because I fucking love Wesker. He's so fun to go against. But maybe they had 5 Weskers in a row or something and they're just fed up with it and they don't want to go against Wesker anymore. Imagine a world where there's no DC penalty. So they disconnect from Wesker. Their enjoyment of the game actually goes up a bit. Everyone still in the lobby still gets a bot instead of a guy that's going to kill themselves immediately because they don't want to play against Wesker. So they're better in that scenario. The guy doesn't have to play against Wesker now. And what is going to happen over time is if they do not have to subject themselves to something that they find to be negative, over time, their brain is going to rewire itself to find that thing less negative over time. You can see it now. How many times have you seen a twins? Once a week or something like that? It's at the point where when I go against twins, I'm not even upset anymore. I go, oh shit, a twins? What the hell? Now, if I get like 4 twins in a row, I'm going to go back to hating it. But because it's so rare and I don't have to be exposed to it that much, when I do get a twins, it's almost a pleasant surprise. So there is a crazy theory I have that if you had no DC penalties, there would be an influx of DCs at the start, but eventually people would be less burned out on the game, which causes the disconnects to begin with. And because they would be able to have overall more enjoyable matches on both Killer and Survivor, by the way, people will be less burned out. And then over time, they would be less likely to DC against the things that made them DC to begin with because there's less burnout. That's just a crackpot theory. Might be completely stupid. I just thought I'd bring that up. But yeah, those are the two sides of the argument. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I think both sides have decent merits, but they both have possible bad things and possible good things. So yeah, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this. It's a very interesting discussion. And that's it. Thanks for watching.